Hi, my name is Ruth Somalo, and I'm one of the featured programmers for Doc NYC. And it's my great pleasure to have with us director Abigail Child, and we're having the Q&A for Origin of a Species, a film that we dearly liked in this festival. Hello, Abigail. Welcome.
Great to see you.
Um, Tell us a little bit, because you're an extraordinary artist. You've been a filmmaker, experimental filmmaker. You have tons of installations, tons of work. What led you to do this project? What led you to all the considerations of artificial intelligence and also in this particular form of like very interesting documentary with like very cool experimental aspects to it?
Oh, thank you so much. For several years now, I've been doing a trilogy of feature films trying to explore duration, how to evolve, perhaps not plot-based, but how to do a longer work, because as you said, I've been doing a lot of shorter work or a lot of work. And I wanted it on women in desire and where ideologies failed women. And so I first looked at Mary Shelley, who in a way was certainly succumbed to romanticism and how that worked or didn't work in her very personal life. And similarly, and that was sort of 18th century and then, or 19th century rather, 1800s, 20th century. And when I was in the process of doing it, I said, I could do this as a trilogy. I don't think it started as a trilogy, but it became one. And I thought of Emma Goldman and anarchism in the 20th century. And then I kept thinking, what would be the 21st century? And I didn't necessarily want a live scientist, but I kept saying the virtual woman. And at one point I thought it'd be a hologram, the singers in Japan who are just light shows and people crowd around to listen. And then I thought, no, androids. Partly my own fascination with androids or automatons, even as a kid. I mention it in some piece of writing that I would go to the Jersey Shore where I spent a lot of time, and there was these fortune-telling automatons you put in your quarter and they would begin to move, and it was just very odd. And of course now we're all virtual. Look at us here, so that it's kind of it's not even a metaphor, it's actually an object for our future. And so that was the initial start of it. And of course I had filmed Mary Shelley in Rome, Emma Goldman in New York, and I thought for sure androids would be in Japan. And I was lucky enough to go to Japan and very quickly meet with really leading roboticists. I was kind of amazed. And they were crazy and they were interesting, and the project was nutty, and Japan was very exciting. But at a certain point, there aren't enough women roboticists. And I was really looking at the issue of how women are perceived. I mean, we have Alexa and Siri, why are they all women? And when I ask people, they say, oh, because women are sweet or kind or servants. So it's there, we know it, but it kind of becomes normalized. So when I couldn't find women scientists as easily, I'm sure there are some in Japan, I went back to America and located some other women. And so it became this, you sort of see it through the movie, where it's the craziest Geminoid, where it's based on a real person, into taking off the scalp of a real person to have them become sort of to move at a distance. It got stranger the longer I studied the work.
Well, you also have you give us like a who is who of at least Japanese robotic scientists and engineers, because and their creations, because we get to meet all these different, we get to meet Seer, we get to meet, which is trying to grasp the likeness of unfeelingness of what human is. You introduced us to who else?
Bays, the first one, yes, and Bays. They become characters, and that's what's very hard to do in film, I think, because when you actually are in front of them, it's just that's why I included that little journalist who says, I don't want to offend her, because it's a doll, but it has enough movement and intention to make you treat it. Your whole humanoid self is geared around treating that as alive. And so you want to respect it. You don't want to punish it, or you feel some strange thoughts around it, like how do you deal with this object?
Yeah. And you introduced us first to the voiceover of like your alter ego, I think, in this film, which is Bina.
Not fine, but Bina.
Bina 48. But you know, in a way, like her words of wisdom regarding, you know, her questions around like what does it mean to be alive? What does it mean to be happy? You know, exploring the unknown. She's like a vehicle for us to join you on this quest of like asking questions about AI, right?
Yes.
And she is also, you know, the only AI that is modeled after a Black lesbian woman, which is also super interesting. How did you find Bina, and what does she represent to you?
Well, Bina, I was really lucky. I was in Japan, and my partner, who knew what my project, had gone to experimental intermedia, where Bina was a visitor, and he said, "This is amazing. She is really speaking so unexpectedly, so much more personally. I mean, it's the vocabulary of the person she's modeled on, as well as bot language." And so I knew right away I wanted to explore it. And then when I realized it was on the East Coast in Vermont, I realized I could really do this because, you're always operating on these tight little budgets that, you're not a big production house. And then, she became really important because she is Black. There are very few, I don't know any other except maybe in Robotex, the sex robots that get Black or, mocha colored androids. And that she's modeled on well, it's a very whole interesting backstory that I didn't go into in the film. They weren't so eager for that. Is that
Bina Rothblatt, no, the woman that
Yes,
she's
it's
modeled
Dina
after.
Rothblatt. She's actually married to uh, Martin, who became um, a woman, and and they have had children together, and he's satellite, Sirius X. He's the she is the founder of Sirius X. So it's a whole. It really is about non-binary and looking at really a future human who transcends a bunch of boundaries, and the scientists say it, and I I think the research is exciting. I guess I believe a little more like Ikigami, that AI is not going to imitate humans. Spontaneity is and movement is at our base, and we're not close there yet. They can beat somebody at chess, but they can't pick up a pencil
Mhm.
easily.
but
So
but yet you bring us some really actual useful inspiring procedures, like, you know, like the young man that had a car accident and is immobilized, you know, from his neck down, and suddenly he's got a, you know, a brain operation to pair him up with like a artificial arm, and that is seems to be working, so that's like
it's
opening.
crazy amazing. And that's also a case I found. The women roboticists in the United States always wanted to keep the human in the picture. Like it wasn't about creating another, it wasn't about being God. It was about being a doctor, in a way, being a bioengineer, and helping people have a full life if something's gone wrong with their body. But that was like one of the most amazing moments, is that he's thinking. When he's thinking, that electron's being read to move a robot arm. So it's really it's mind travel. And it also explains when people have appendages off, that they feel things, because they really are. Those nerve endings are still there, and they're still firing.
Something that is really great about the way that you bring us in this like long trip that asks all the questions, you know, the questions of likeness, like why are we so caught up in them having our own likeness, you know, to the point with one of the scientists is making a robot that looks exactly like him, or like when other scientists are saying like, you know, a vacuum cleaner is the robot and it doesn't need to look like us to be helpful and to be integrated in society, or to evolve. Then you bring us to this idea of like, you know, ethics and norms and what it means to be human, and like the boundaries between like having somebody that is helping us or having somebody that is in servitude of us and has no agency, or, you know, all these kind of like very important ethical and philosophical questions So you
Right.
end the film with the question of like, well, this maybe is just a way for us to think about ourselves and who we are as humans.
Right. How do we embody these technologies? And right now we're in that space of practicing our embodiment. No, we've all had to adjust. Absolutely, I wanted that move into the ethical questions because those questions are there. It's also it's partly devastating and frightening, and it's also very funny. I mean, when Ishiguro is there with the three different people, the man, the woman, and the English guy, and 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 it's like, where's the person in this scene? You know, you're kind of like looking for it, and that's appearance. You know, that's where we get hooked. Um, but I think it is about us. It's about us now. And I guess I wanted, you began with the experimental history in my own work, and that I saw it as the scientists sort of state of the art. Let's really examine deeply what they're doing, what a scientist's vision of the world, how that affects the science and what we receive ultimately. But also that we're living in the future. That when you look at our architecture or our time frame or what's going on right now, again, I'm sorry to keep repeating it, but I'm always surprised, or it's such a perfect metaphor. But you look at that, the cities we live in and the way we live, it's already the future. You know, it's in a partial place, it's not everywhere, but we can feel that. So there's that. And then I was looking at the history. So I was looking sort of at the past, present, and future, and that the past is this dream of a life force that would be a companion, would be a slave, would be a would it would be its own self. You know, that's where the threat always comes in. So that's why I use, you know, these classic Stepford Wives or Frankenstein or Robbie the Robot. And I don't know about you, but I was charmed with these things as a child. I mean, this was like, and somebody kept saying, why is a jetpack in there, you know? And you know, that's not a robot. And I was like, but this whole thing is about this future dream, and I always thought I'd have a jetpack by now. You know, I could just go where I wanted to go. And so I meant that,
Absolutely.
you know, as part of the dream. And then there's the present, the current thing. And then what are we creating? And what are the questions we're going to ask? One of the scientists said, it didn't make the film, but it was very profound. He said, if we really make robots that are sentient, they will also suffer. And I think that's, you know, that's a powerful thought, and a thought that leads into things. So what are the legal ramifications? Are they pets if they're not people? You know, are they toys that when we're through with them, we put them in the closet and turn them off? So I think there's, you know, it's a fascinating reality we're walking into. We're in. I guess that's what I wanted to say. Sorry.
Do you think that in your research, I love also that you've utilized like the history of sci-fi in cinema and the different ways that cinema has dreamed, you know, the artificial intelligence of the sentient being other than humans. But do you think that in this last like 100 years of cinema and 100 years of technology that you've researched so well, do you think that there is something going on in parallel to kind of like this new non-anthropocentric way of looking at the world, post-colonial way of looking at the world, like pacifistic way? Do you think, you know, in terms of like not thinking about pets as pets, but as sentient beings, you know, what would be the next step, you know, in relationship to artificial intelligence if we were to consider that we do not own anything else and that we all have a soul and we're part of everything? Like, do you think that is still in line with continuing the research for artificial intelligence, or that's more in line with like, you know, let's step
That's
out of
more
it?
a really idealistic vision of the world that I share. And I mean, I will also say, I started this piece and I wrote about it originally in early funding efforts. That when I was a kid, I really thought rocks were alive, but they were moving slower, which was an intuitive knowledge of atomic particles, right, and molecules. And so, yes, idealistically, I think that Japanese sense that everything has a soul is exquisite and respectful of the earth and the world we live in and other people. But when I'm looking at Erica and he's saying she's got a soul, I'm a little bit like, maybe not. So I think there's this idealistic moment and or not moment, hopefully future, but I'm not sure the science is going that way directly. I think when they're helping people, yes, and there's a marvelous things where they're attaching nerves to, so I think as prosthetics, this is amazing. And in a way, that's what that is. It's a mental prosthetic. That is a really great possible future. But it's always the powers that be and the ethics of the person doing it and the ethics of the funding. We're seeing that now. I mean, I don't want to leave my topic. It's huge topics, but why aren't we all working on climate change this very second? So I can't be as positive after doing this. I mean, I really had fun and it was tantalizing and the questions were crazy. I mean, just the sex robots, my camera, I was shooting, but I had a camera woman as well and a small woman like me. And, we were both like laughing and then at a certain point it was like, they're sexy, these weird plastic, almost deformed female bodies, when you touch them, they were, in other words, we were both being turned on by something we didn't want to be turned on by. Mm-hmm. So I'm just saying, I think the world's culture is in this place where you have to struggle for your ethics. What does the poet say? Get drunk on, liquor, poetry, or virtue. Yeah. So we're going to have to be drunk on virtue to move into the future.
Well, thank you so much, Abigail, for sharing this extraordinary journey with us. It was a pleasure talking to you today.
Oh, great. I hope we'll see each other again, maybe in the flesh. All of you. Thank you.